Have you ever wondered what it feels like to have it all, only to watch it crumble in an instant? What would you do if your fairy tale turned into your worst nightmare? Not in a movie, but in raw, ruthless reality. Imagine this. She was there, at 40,000 feet, sipping Dom Perignon from a Baccarat glass, the flash of her Cartier bracelet, a gift from a billionaire who idolized her, reflecting in the clouds. Chloe Sinclair lived a life most people only dare to dream of, flying from Paris to St. Barth on her private jet, like a goddess of modern Olympus. But there was a fateful flight, a trip bound for sunny Marbella, Spain, where the dream turned into a nightmare so real it will chill your blood. The pilot, in his immaculate uniform, didn't address her. He walked past, as if she were invisible, and greeted the jet's true owner, the billionaire's visibly pregnant wife, with a look that could freeze the Atlantic. This is not fiction. This is the brutal and true story of what happens when the Mistress is abandoned on an airport tarmac, her dreams shattered. The air inside a Gulfstream G650 doesn't just circulate, it caresses. It smelled of new leather, a delicate touch of jasmine from the freshly cut flowers in the cabin, and that unmistakable, costly fragrance of jet fuel. For Chloe Sinclair, this was the scent of triumph. It was the perfume of arrival, of a destiny that exceeded all expectations. She slid a perfectly manicured finger, nails painted in a ballet slipper shade, around the rim of her Baccarat crystal glass. The champagne, a vintage Dom Perignon rosé, bubbled with exquisite laziness. Across from her, Julian Croft, one of New York's real estate titans, furiously typed on his laptop. He didn't look up, but a fleeting smile crossed his lips. "Enjoying the view, darling?" he murmured, his voice a low, confident growl of power. Chloe looked out the window. The view was the cold blue curve of the Earth's horizon, a spectacle reserved for astronauts and the wealthiest 0.01% of the planet. They were somewhere over the Atlantic, gliding from Teterboro toward a private runway near Marbella, Spain. "It's perfect, Julian," she said, and she meant it. Perfection had become her currency. Chloe's life just 6 months ago had been a universe apart. She was simply Chloe, from Connecticut, a junior PR associate at a prestigious Manhattan firm, drowning in student debt and surviving on lukewarm salads devoured at her desk. Her studio had a privileged view of a brick wall. Her glamour was limited to a subway card and 2-for-1 deals at the supermarket. Then, she was assigned to the Croft Holdings Gala. Julian Croft wasn't just in the room, he was the room. He had a gravitational pull, a supernova of charisma, bespoke Brioni suits, and a Patek Philippe watch that whispered, rather than shouted, its 6-figure price tag. He looked at her, not as an employee, but as a woman. Their affair was a whirlwind of 5-star suites at the Plaza, front-row seats at the Opera, and dinners at Per Se, where the chef sent personalized delicacies just for them. But the real change, the real social ascent, was the jet. Julian called it the Albatross, a Gulfstream G650 registered under a Delaware holding company. Chloe called it home. This was their 4th trip this month, Paris for a weekend, where he bought her a Kelly bag at the Hermès flagship store on Rue de Faubourg Saint-Honoré, an act that for Julian didn't even require a waiting list. Milan for a single night, just to dine at Krakow. And now Marbella. "This is just the beginning, Chloe," Julian said, finally closing his laptop. He leaned forward and took her hand. On her wrist, a new Cartier love bracelet gleamed, the one the saleswoman had closed with a tiny screwdriver. "I'm closing the biggest deal of my life, After this, we can be more public. Chloe's heart gave a small, hopeful leap. The public part was the only flaw in her perfect life. Julian was notoriously discreet, citing a complicated business partnership as the reason for his secrecy. She knew, was separated from his wife. A formality, he had called it. A cold, emotionless merger of two families. We haven't lived as man and wife in years. Chloe accepted it. It was the standard script for a man of his stature. She was the one who understood him, who matched his ambition, who wasn't afraid to live. As she reclined in the plush, cream leather seat, covering her legs with an Hermes Avalon blanket, the flight attendant, a silent woman named Maria, appeared instantly. "Another glass, Miss Sinclair?" "Please," Chloe smiled. She slid her finger across her phone screen, looking at the photos she had taken. Her, clinking glasses with Julian. Her, posing on the jet steps. Her, with her new Kelly bag. She couldn't post them. Not yet. Julian was adamant about that. Privacy is the last true luxury, darling. So she tucked them away in a folder, a private gallery of her triumph. She was 26, flying on a private jet to Spain with a billionaire who loved her. She thought of her former colleagues, probably sharing a disappointing pitcher of happy hour sangria right then. She drank her champagne. It was crisp, with notes of strawberry and a hint of inevitability. This was her life now. There was no going back. Titu. The desperate fantasy. The Bond Point invoice. Marbella was a sun-drenched haze of exclusive beach clubs, private villas, and the quiet, ubiquitous hum of serious money. Julian was in his element, presiding over the terrace of an expansive white stucco mansion overlooking the Mediterranean. He was deep in conversation with several older European men, their crisp linen shirts purposefully unbuttoned. Chloe was left to explore. Julian had given her an American Express black card, a house card, as he called it, and the keys to a white Aston Martin DB11. She drove to Puerto Banús, the marina where yachts the size of apartment buildings were moored. She walked into a Loewe boutique, the scent of expensive leather wrapping around her. She picked up a puzzle bag. The saleswoman, noticing her bracelet and the diamond-bezeled Rolex Julian had given her, attended to her instantly. "A lovely choice, perhaps for the yacht?" The woman smiled deferentially. As Chloe was about to pay, her phone vibrated. It was Julian. "Where are you?" His voice was tight, not the easygoing tone he used in public. "Shopping at the marina, darling. Found the cutest bag." "Did I tell you you could go to the marina?" he snapped. "I told you to stay at the villa. These are important people, Chloe. I can't have you visible." The heat of the Spanish sun suddenly felt like a cold chill on her skin. "Visible? Julian, you told me—" "Just come back now." He hung up. The saleswoman's smile had frozen, polite. Chloe felt a blush of shame. She fumbled for the card. I'll take it." When she returned, the party was over. Julian was on the terrace, staring out at the sea. "Who were they?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light, holding up the handbag. "Look what I got." He ignored the bag. "They were investors, Chloe. People who don't understand complications." "Am I a complication, Julian?" He turned, his expression softening. He crossed the terrace and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. No, God, no, you're the only sane thing in my life." He held her at arm's length. "It's just, my partner. She's getting difficult." The partner. This was the source of all his stress, the invisible hand keeping Chloe in the shadows. "The separation. It's not going well," he continued, guiding her to a lounge chair. "She's fighting me on everything. She controls a lot. The assets are all tangled. It's a mess." The wife? Chloe clarified. Yes, Eleanor. He said the name as if it tasted of acid. Eleanor doesn't understand business. She only understands control. She's vengeful. It was the first time he had sounded vulnerable. This, Chloe understood. A bitter ex. A scorned woman. What? What does she control? Chloe asked. Julian sighed, looking out at the palatial villa. More than you know. She inherited a huge amount. My own success is tied to her family's name. I've spent 20 years building an empire, and now she wants to claim it all. Just because I was unhappy. He was painting her a picture of a man, trapped, a genius, captive to a dragon. And Chloe was the one who could save him. She won't win, Chloe said, her voice fierce. You're smarter than her. You're Julian Croft. He smiled, a genuine, grateful smile. That's why I love you. You get it. He kissed her, long and deep. The tension from the phone call dissolved. He was right. She was the one who understood him. That night, he made love to her with a desperate passion, as if she were his only anchor in a storm. The next morning, as she packed her new Loewe bag into her Rimowa suitcase, she saw his briefcase open on the desk. Inside a leather portfolio, she saw a stack of papers. She would never dare to pry, but one document was on top. It was an invoice, from a store she didn't recognize. Bon Point. Curious, she Googled it. Her stomach clenched. It was an ultra-exclusive, obscenely expensive Parisian children's boutique. The invoice was for a lot. A hand-embroidered cashmere baby blanket, a classic cherry print newborn set. Crib? She felt dizzy. He had told her they had no children. He had said the separation was cold. She was standing there, phone in hand, when he walked out of the shower, a towel slung low on his hips. He saw the invoice, saw her face, and his eyes went cold for a split second. Then, the legendary charm clicked back on. Oh, thank God you reminded me, he said, snapping his fingers. My goddaughter, my old partner from a previous venture. His wife just had a baby. A girl. Olivia, I think. Gotta send the best, you know. It's just business, darling. Appearances. He said it so smoothly, so easily that her panic felt foolish. Of course. A gift. A business gift. What had she been thinking? That he had a secret baby? The idea was absurd. Right, she said, forcing a bright smile. How thoughtful. Only the best, he said, kissing her forehead. Now let's get out of here. I have a surprise for you. We're not going back to New York yet. I'm diverting the jet. Where are we going? She asked, the excitement returning, erasing the doubt. Los Angeles, he smiled. I'm finalizing the purchase of our new home in Bel Air. The deal is done, Chloe. The partner, Eleanor. She's out. It's over. This is it. Our new life. 3. The abandonment on the tarmac. The flight from Marbella to Los Angeles was 12 hours of pure, unadulterated bliss. The Albatross wasn't just a jet. It was a testament to Julian's power. He had diverted it with a single phone call. He had changed their entire itinerary, their entire life, on a whim. This flight felt different. It wasn't a getaway. It was a relocation. To us, Julian said, raising his glass. Chloe noticed he now drank scotch, not champagne. A Macallan 25, his deal-closing drink. To us, she repeated, her voice thick with emotion. And to Bel Air. To Bel Air, he confirmed. Clean slate, no more partners, no more complications. He spent most of the flight on the satellite phone, in the private cabin at the back of the plane. She could hear him. His voice, low and hard. The offer is final. She has 24 hours to sign. I don't care what the prenuptial agreement says. That's the number. Chloe put on her noise-canceling headphones, selected a movie on the massive private screen, and nestled into her cashmere blanket. She felt a surge of sympathy for him. He was fighting for their future. He was liquidating his old life. All for her. The thought was so powerful, so romantic, it brought tears to her eyes. She must have fallen asleep, because the next thing she knew, the flight attendant was gently tapping her shoulder. "Miss Sinclair, we'll be starting our descent into Van Nuys in 30 minutes. Chloe sat up, stretching. She felt giddy with joy. Van Nuys, the legendary private airport for the rich and famous. Here, her new life began. She went to the lavatory, a room larger than the kitchen in her old apartment, all marble and polished wood, to freshen up. She applied a new layer of Tom Ford lipstick, insatiable, and fixed her hair. She wanted to look perfect when she stepped off the plane, the first step into her new life. She returned to her seat just as Julian walked out of the rear cabin. He looked exhausted, but he smiled when he saw her. "Done," he said, collapsing into the seat across from her. "It's all done. It's over," she whispered. "It's over." He took her hand. "The house is ours. The lawyers are handling the final loose ends. When we land, I'll be a free man. And you'll be the future Mrs. Croft." Chloe gasped, the words hanging in the pressurized air, more potent than champagne, more valuable than diamonds. "Mrs. Croft. Julian, are you?" "I've never been more serious," he said, his eyes intense. "This has been hell, Chloe. You've been my light. I won't hide you for another second. When we land, a car will take you to the Beverly Hills Hotel. I have to go straight to the lawyers, sign the final papers, and then I'll meet you there. Tonight, we celebrate. But why don't you take me with you?" "No, darling. This is the ugly part. The end of the old. I want you to be the beginning of the new. Go. Get a spa treatment. Buy a dress. It's on me. Tonight, the world is ours." As the jet descended, they flew low over the Santa Monica Mountains, the sprawling grid of the San Fernando Valley lighting up as dusk fell. Chloe's heart hammered so fast, she thought it might burst from her chest. The landing was so smooth, she barely felt it. The jet taxied for a long time, past hangars housing fleets of private planes, a city of wealth. They finally pulled up in a secluded area, far from the main terminal, a private hangar lit by spotlights. "Here we are," Julian said. He stood up and kissed her deeply. "I love you. Never forget that." "I love you too," she said. "Go. Finish this." "I will," he said. He grabbed his briefcase. "My team will take you to the hotel. I'll see you at 8. He walked toward the back of the plane. Chloe frowned. "Aren't you leaving through the front?" "No, I have to disembark from the back, meet my security detail. Protocol for this hangar. They're very particular." It was strange, but everything in this world was strange. Chloe nodded. "Okay, I'll see you tonight." He disappeared. A moment later, she heard the thump of a different door opening and closing. The main cabin door opened. The soft California twilight drifted in. The flight attendant, Maria, smiled. "Miss Sinclair, welcome to Los Angeles." Chloe picked up her Kelly bag, draped her raincoat over her shoulders, and stepped out onto the metal stairs. The air was warm, smelling of dust and jasmine. She took a deep breath. She was here. Chloe paused at the top of the stairs, a queen surveying her new kingdom. The hangar was vast, clean enough to eat off the floor. A sleek black Maybach sedan was parked 100 feet away, presumably for her. She walked down the stairs, her heels making a decisive sound on the metal. This was the moment. The first step. The pilot, a man with an impeccable uniform and silver-gray hair at his temples, emerged from beneath the wing. He was tall, with a military bearing. He had been in the cockpit the whole time, a silent presence. His name, she had read on the badge, was Captain Marcus Hayes. He walked toward her. Chloe prepared her most gracious, "Thank you for the flight" smile. But Captain Hayes did not stop. He walked straight past her, his eyes fixed on something behind her. "Mom, welcome back. We've just completed the transatlantic log as requested. Cargo is secure and will be removed shortly." Chloe spun around, confused. Cargo? A black Rolls-Royce Cullinan, which had been parked in the shadow of the hangar, slid silently to a stop just behind the Maybach. A chauffeur rushed to the rear door, but it was already opening from within. A woman stepped out. She was, even to Chloe's stunned eyes, magnificent. Tall, with jet black hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She wore a simple, perfectly tailored black wool coat that was draped, not buttoned, over her body. She moved with an animal grace, a predatory stillness, and she was, beyond a shadow of a doubt, 8 months pregnant. The woman fixed her gaze, not on the pilot, but on Chloe. Her eyes were a deep, icy blue, and they held an expression of profound, bored assessment. Chloe's blood ran cold. The Bond Point invoice. The difficult partner. Eleanor. Captain Hayes stood at attention. "Mrs. Croft, I hope the flight was comfortable for your guest." "She looks quite comfortable." The woman's voice was low and smooth, with a slight British accent. "Thank you, Captain. You may prepare for the return leg to New York. Mrs. Croft." "Mrs. Croft." Chloe heard her own voice, thin and reedy. Julian is waiting for me." Eleanor Croft smiled. It was the most terrifying smile Chloe had ever seen. It didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, I imagine he is," Eleanor said, taking a step closer. "He's probably in a holding cell at the Van Nuys Municipal Police Precinct. I timed the call to my lawyers about 10 minutes before landing." Chloe's world tilted. "What? No, he's signing papers for our new house. We're getting married." The sound that came from Eleanor was almost a laugh, but it held no humor. "Marry? Oh, you poor foolish thing you are, aren't you?" She walked past Chloe, sliding a gloved hand along the G650's fuselage. "This is a beautiful jet, isn't it? A Gulfstream G650ER, serial number 6451. My father bought it for me for my 30th birthday. It is registered under my holding company, EC Holdings, LLC. Not Julian's, mine." She turned back to Chloe, her eyes sweeping over her from head to toe. "My husband, or I should say, my soon-to-be ex-husband has many flaws, but his most expensive one is his taste for hobbies." "I'm not a hobby," Chloe whispered, her throat tight. "He loves me." "Of course he does," Eleanor said softly, as one would speak to a child. "He also loved the last one, a blonde gallery assistant from Soho, and the one before that, an aspiring actress in London. Julian. He collects pretty ambitious girls. He thinks it's a perk of marrying me." "No. He said you were separated. He said it was a merger." "Oh, it was a merger, darling. A merger where my family's $10 billion real estate empire merged with his, with his charm, and a failing construction business in Queens. He is a glorified employee, Miss Sinclair, an employee I am about to fire." Eleanor gestured to the pilot. "Captain Hayes, be so kind as to inform Miss Sinclair of the manifest." Captain Hayes, his face an impassive mask, looked at Chloe. "Ma'am, for the duration of this flight, you were logged on the official manifest as on-board entertainment." Chloe's legs gave out. She stumbled backward, hitting the airstair railing. "On-board entertainment?" "He's very literal," Eleanor said, consulting her watch. "Now here is what is going to happen. My husband has been systematically liquidating joint assets and diverting funds for months, all to build this fantasy life with you. The house in Bel Air. It was a $30 million purchase he attempted to make using a line of credit from my account. My lawyers froze it this morning. The deal he was closing, Chloe breathed. The scotch, the satellite calls. That was all. Him attempting to fight my lawyers. Eleanor finished. The flight here. I allowed it. In fact, I insisted on it. It is very difficult to prove the embezzlement of marital assets in a divorce, but having my pilot fly my husband's mistress across the Atlantic on my jet while he embezzles? That, Miss Sinclair, is what lawyers call Exhibit A. You are the star witness in my divorce settlement. The Maybach, the hotel. Chloe grasped at a straw. The car, Eleanor said, pointing to the Maybach, is for my legal team arriving from LAX. The Beverly Hills Hotel? Your reservation, of course, was canceled, along with the credit card Julian gave you, which was also mine. She took a step closer, the cold fury now radiating from her. You have been wearing my clothes, sleeping in my houses, drinking my champagne, and flying on my plane. And now you are finished. Eleanor nodded to two large, grim-looking men in suits who had emerged from the hangar. Diaz, Scott, kindly retrieve Mrs. Croft's assets. Assets? Chloe whimpered. The Kelly bag, Eleanor said, pointing. My father gave it to me. I see Julian gifted it to you, and the bracelet, and the watch. They were purchased with stolen funds. They are evidence. No! Chloe clutched the bag. No, he gave them to me. The man, Diaz, did not hesitate. Gently, but irresistibly, he peeled her fingers from the strap. He did not touch Chloe, but his presence was a wall of muscle. The other man, Scott, stepped forward. The bracelet, Miss Sinclair, and the watch. The bracelet it's locked. We have the key, Diaz said, holding up the small, iconic Cartier screwdriver. Sobbing, Chloe extended her wrist. With a clinical click, the symbol of Julian's love was removed. Then, the Rolex. They were dropped into a sterile-looking evidence bag. My suitcase, Chloe cried, pointing to the cargo hold. My clothes, my passport. Your passport and wallet will be retrieved and returned to you, Eleanor said, her voice softening barely a fraction. I am not a monster. I am merely thorough. She looked at the Kelly bag in Diaz's hand, a look of disgust crossing her face. Have that incinerated. I do not want it back. Yes, Mrs. Croft. Eleanor turned to leave, her coat billowing around her. Wait! Chloe screamed, a sudden, desperate anger cutting through her shame. Why? Why do this? Why me? You're pregnant. He did this to you. Eleanor stopped at the Rolls-Royce door. She turned, and for the first time, her mask of icy control slipped. Chloe saw a flash of real, deep pain. He didn't do this to me, Miss Sinclair. He did this with you. She placed a protective hand over her swollen belly. This baby, this is my family. This is my empire. Julian was a miscalculation. A line item I am correcting. You were just the cost of business. And Julian? Chloe asked, her last shred of hope vanishing. What about him? Eleanor's smile returned, cold and sharp. He will be fine. He signed a prenuptial agreement that would make a monk weep. He gets nothing. And with this little stunt today, he'll be lucky to keep his name. He'll be out of jail by morning, I'm sure. But he'll have nothing. No money, no power, no what? She got into the Rolls-Royce. The door closed with the silent, expensive thud of a bank vault. The car slid away, leaving Chloe alone on the tarmac. Captain Hayes cleared his throat. Miss Sinclair? Chloe turned, tears streaming down her face, her lipstick smeared. He handed her her Louis Vuitton wallet and passport. He dropped them into her hands, as if they were contaminated. The hangar is a secure zone. You cannot stay here, he said, not unkindly, but not warmly either. There is an exit that way. It leads to the public street. I would suggest you call a car. Chloe looked at her phone. The familiar Croft Holdings Wi-Fi signal was gone. She was on guest. She opened the Uber app. Her current location pinned her at the edge of a Van Nuys airfield. She typed Beverly Hills Hotel and flinched. She checked her bank account, her real account, from her days. Balance, $114.38. She deleted the destination and typed Motel 6 Van Nuys. As she walked toward the distant chain-link fence, the G650's engines began to whine, the sound a terrible, ascending scream. It was preparing for its flight back to New York. Chloe Sinclair, standing in the darkness with only the clothes on her back and $114 to her name, put her hands to her face and wept. 4. The fall and the horizontal reality. The lobby of the Motel 6 smelled of stale cigarette smoke, bleach, and desperation. The man behind the plexiglass barrier looked at Chloe's figure, tear-streaked and dressed in haute couture, with practiced indifference. $79.99 plus a $20 key deposit, he said, chewing on a toothpick. Chloe slid her debit card through the machine. The approved message was a small, agonizing relief. The room was beige, the carpet sticky. The bedspread had a cigarette burn. The air conditioner rattled like a dying beast. Chloe sat on the edge of the bed, the polyester quilt rough against her legs. This was impossible. It was a nightmare. Julian would fix it. She called his number. It went straight to a new automated voice. The number you have dialed has been disconnected. She called his assistant. Voicemail. She called the head of his family office. Voicemail. She was blocked. The new life he had promised her, the house in Bel Air, the future as Mrs. Croft. It had all been a lie, an elaborate, desperate fantasy he had created for himself as much as for her. He wasn't a king. He was a court jester. And Eleanor? Eleanor was the queen. A cold, pragmatic rage began to replace her hysteria. Eleanor had called her Exhibit A. She had been used, not only by Julian, who had used her for sex and ego, but by Eleanor, who had used her as a pawn to win a divorce. She looked at her phone, her lifeline. She had to get back to New York. She had an apartment, a tiny 400-square-foot studio, but it was hers. She had kept it, thank God, as storage for her old life. She opened the Delta app, a one-way, last-minute flight, LAX to JFK. Coach class, $480. She didn't have enough. The panic that seized her was physical, a cold hand gripping her windpipe. She looked around the room, desperate. She had nothing. Eleanor's team had been thorough. The bracelet, the watch, the handbag. Wait. She ran to the bathroom. Her makeup case. It was the one thing they had overlooked. She opened it. Inside, beneath the Tom Ford lipsticks and the La Mer samples, was her emergency stash. $300 in cash, and her hand closed around it. A small velvet pouch. Inside were a pair of simple diamond stud earrings, her grandmother's, the only piece of real jewelry she had owned before Julian. She had stopped wearing them because Julian had called them quaint. She had just enough. She booked the flight for the next morning. An Uber to LAX would take the rest of her cash. The next 12 hours were the longest of her life. She couldn't sleep. She sat in the darkness, the flashing motel sign light blinking red on the walls, and replayed every moment. Every private dinner, every business call, every soft, plausible lie, the Bond-Point gift, the difficult partner. She had been so eager to believe. She had traded her common sense for comfort, her intuition for luxury. She had seen the red flags, but she had called them a parade. When she finally boarded the 6 a.m. flight, squeezed into a middle seat between a snoring salesman and a crying mother with a baby, the humiliation was complete. The flight attendant, handing her a plastic cup of coffee, looked at her with pity. Chloe still wore her expensive raincoat, but it was now wrinkled, tear-stained, and motel dirty. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had fallen from a great height. Upon landing at JFK, she took the elevated train, then the subway, back to her old apartment in Brooklyn. The key stuck in the lock. She had to jiggle it. The air inside was stale. A pile of mail lay by the door, her old life, waiting for her. She showered for an hour, scrubbing her skin raw, trying to wash off the smell of the jet, the motel, and her own failure. She spent the next 2 weeks in a haze. Her phone was silent. The world she had inhabited, the world of private hangars and black cars, had simply vanished. The door had closed. One morning, she forced herself onto the internet. She needed a job. She needed money. Her old PR firm's website was the first thing she looked at, and there, on the news tab, she saw it. A press release. Croft Holdings announces corporate restructuring. Eleanor Croft, CEO and chairwoman, to lead streamlined vision. There was a photo. Eleanor, radiant, powerful, standing in a boardroom. She was no longer pregnant. Curious, Chloe typed Julian Croft into Google. The first result was from the feared page 6. The fall of a crofty husband. Julian Croft, notorious womanizer and husband of real estate heiress Eleanor Croft, has been officially ousted from the company board. Sources claim Croft, caught financing a lavish lifestyle for a long list of mistresses, settled his divorce for a ridiculous amount, rumored to be less than his annual bonus. The article was devastating. It detailed his stipend, the company jet, which the text clarified was his wife's, and his predilection for Instagram models. And then, the final, most brutal line. His latest paramour, a former PR associate named Chloe Sinclair, was allegedly abandoned on the Van Nuys tarmac. Eleanor literally had her thrown off the plane, an insider claims. It's a legend. Chloe dropped the phone. It wasn't just a failure. It was a story. A joke. A former PR associate? Abandoned on the tarmac? Eleanor hadn't just defeated her. She had defined her. She had written the final chapter of Chloe's gilded life. And in that chapter, Chloe was the fool, the disposable commodity. The humiliation was a physical ache. Chloe felt she couldn't breathe, as if the walls of her tiny Brooklyn studio were closing in on her. She threw the laptop against the wall. The screen splintered into a cobweb of cracks, and then went black. The silence in the room was deafening. She was alone, truly alone. No money, no job, no contacts. The friends she had made in Julian's world, the other women with perfect highlights and tiny dogs, had, of course, vanished. Their calls went unanswered. To them, she wasn't Chloe. She was Julian's girl, and Julian was now toxic. Worse than toxic, he was poor. Her old friends, the ones from her PR days, had watched her ascend with a mix of awe and envy. Call them now. Say, "Hey, remember that private jet life I was living? Well, turns out it was all a lie, and I'm broke. Can I borrow $50? The shame was too great, so she did the only thing she could. She sold the last remnants of her other life. She took the subway to a luxury consignment store in Soho, a place she used to frequent to browse vintage pieces. Now, she was on the other side of the counter. The buyer, bored and chic-looking, assessed her. Chloe had brought her last trophies: a pair of Chanel shoes, a Gucci belt, the Tom Ford coat she was wearing. They were the few items Julian had purchased for her from a store, not from his wife's assets. "The coat is fine," the buyer said, rubbing the fabric. "But we're getting a lot of influencer cast-offs this season. I can give you $200 for it. Store credit." "I need cash," Chloe said, her voice small. "Cash is 30%. The buyer shrugged. "So, $120. Chloe sold it. She sold the shoes. She sold the belt. She walked out with $280 in crumpled bills, enough for groceries and her subway pass. The ascent from rock bottom. The new reality. The days became weeks. Somber, relentless weeks. Chloe was a ghost, haunting her own life. She applied for dozens of jobs, but the PR world is small. The Page 6 article had been forwarded. "The tarmac girl. Oof!" one recruiter had accidentally said out loud, thinking the microphone was muted during a phone interview. "No, I don't think she's on brand for us right now. She was radioactive. She wasn't a professional. She was a joke." The girl on the tarmac. After 2 equally humiliating rejections, the last of her consignment money was running out. Her $114.38 was long gone. Her rent for her tiny Brooklyn studio was almost due. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She wasn't just broke. She was on a countdown to homelessness. She stopped searching at PR firms. She stopped searching in Manhattan. She opened Craigslist, filtered by Queens, and clicked on Office Administration. The ad read, "Billing Coordinator, Family Dental Practice. Must be organized. Good with numbers. No experience required. Will train. $19 an hour." Dr. Zito's dental and orthodontic practice was in a strip mall in Jackson Heights, squeezed between a 99-cent pizza shop and a laundromat. The air inside smelled of fluoride and burnt coffee. The interview was with Dr. Zito's wife, Maria, a kind, tired-looking woman in floral scrubs who ran the office. She didn't ask Chloe about brand strategy. She couldn't tell Page 6 from the New England Journal of Medicine. She simply pointed to a stack of files. "The last girl left a mess with the insurance claims. Are you good with computers?" "Yes," Chloe said. "You seem like a bright girl, though a little fancy for this place," Maria said, looking at Chloe's one remaining good blazer. "Can you start Monday?" "I can," Chloe said, her throat tight. And so, her new life began. It was a rhythm of beeps. The 5:30 a.m. alarm on her phone. The beep of the microwave as she heated water for instant coffee. The beep of her subway card. The ding-dong of the F train doors closing. The commute was a new kind of cabin. It wasn't the cream leather and jasmine scent of the jet. It was the 6:15 a.m. F train. It was crowded, a rolling capsule of raw, unglamorous humanity. She was pressed against nurses in scrubs, construction workers with plaster dust on their boots, and sleepy students. In Julian's world, she had been a doll, an ornament to be looked at. Here, she was nothing, just another body. And in her complete and total anonymity, she found a strange, empty, but valuable measure of peace. No one looked at her. No one cared who she was. She was just Chloe going to work. Her job was a universe away from gala planning. It was in a windowless back room of the office, reconciling accounts. She learned a new language, the language of dental insurance codes. D2040, porcelain crown. D80180, comprehensive orthodontic treatment. Her lunch was a peanut butter sandwich, eaten at her metal desk in 10 minutes. She listened to the other receptionists, Brenda and Tanisha, talk about their kids, an episode of The Bachelorette, or a 2-for-1 coupon at the local supermarket. Chloe, the woman who had casually discussed the wine list at Per Se, only nodded, smiled, and said nothing. She was a ghost, haunting a dental office. She simply worked. She chased down $50 co-payments from insurance companies. She untangled the mess the previous girl had left. She created a new filing system. She turned out to be ruthlessly efficient at it. The same meticulous attention to detail she once applied to Julian's social calendar, she now applied to Cigna. Then came the first paycheck. It was a physical check. The office didn't have direct deposit. Net pay, $584.32. Chloe took it to the corner check cashing place, since she hadn't yet been able to open a bank account with her negative balance. The man behind the plexiglass charged his 3% fee. She walked out with a handful of crumpled bills. $564.79. She stood on the Queens sidewalk, the sound of salsa music blaring from a nearby bodega, and just held it. The Cartier love bracelet had been worth 20 times this amount, but it had been a gift, an accessory, a leash. This was ballast. This $564 was the first solid thing she had held in 2 years. It was hers. She had traded 40 hours of her life for it. It was real. It paid her rent. It bought groceries. It started a spreadsheet to pay off the $4,000 in credit card debt she had accrued immediately after her downfall. 6 months passed. Winter turned into a dirty, slushy spring. Chloe hadn't just been a good employee. She had been ruthlessly efficient. The chaos of Julian's world, the constant need to read the temperature of a room, had made her hyper-observant. She saw inefficiencies everywhere. She reorganized the entire billing system, automating reminders, streamlining claims. She saved the practice, as Dr. Zito told her, a small fortune. He called her into his office. "Chloe," he said, "Maria is cutting back her hours. I want you to be the office sub-manager." It came with a 75-cent raise per hour and her own cubicle, slightly larger. It felt like winning the lottery. Another 6 months passed. It was a Friday in October. She had just hit send on the week's payroll. She had $700 in her savings account. She had paid off, as of last week, the last of her credit card debt. She felt light. On her way home, she did something she never did. She walked past the Starbucks near her apartment, a luxury she had long ago cut, and walked in. It was a treat, not a treat from anyone, not a reward for being pretty or charming. It was a treat for herself, alone, paid for by spreadsheets and dental codes. "A grand skinny vanilla latte, please," she said. It was $6, an hour of her old salary. She didn't care. As she waited at the pickup counter, she glanced at the small TV mounted in the corner. It was tuned to Bloomberg, the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, a massive banner, a familiar logo, Croft Holdings. And there, ringing the opening bell, was Eleanor Croft. She looked magnificent. She wore an impeccable white Armani pantsuit. Her dark hair was pulled back. On a simple gold chain, Chloe could just make out a small A for Alexander. She was flanked by her executive team, almost all women. She looked serene, powerful, and completely, terrifyingly in control. The anchor was excited. "And it is a huge day for Croft Holdings, going public with its new real estate technology firm. CEO Eleanor Croft, who took sole control of her family's legacy just over a year ago after a high-profile corporate and personal split, has more than doubled the company's valuation. A true masterclass in turning crisis into opportunity." The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Croft Holdings, CRFT, IPO opening." Chloe stood still, the sound of the espresso machine hissing behind her. She was watching the woman who had ruined her, the woman who had clinically, surgically, emotionlessly excised her like a tumor. And a strange feeling washed over her. The heat, the bitter bile of the envy she expected. It wasn't there. The rage, the humiliation, It was all gone, faded like a jet trail. In its place was a cold, hard dorsada. Quiet respect. Eleanor hadn't just been a scorned wife. She was a CEO. She hadn't been emotional on that tarmac. She had been strategic. The flight to Van Nuys wasn't revenge. It was discovery. It was Exhibit A, just as she had said. Eleanor had used Chloe, yes, but she had used her like a scalpel, with precision, to excise the cancer. The cancer was Julian. Chloe was merely the instrument. It's a legend. The phrase from page 6 came back to her. It wasn't a taunt. It was a fact. Eleanor had been playing chess, and Chloe hadn't even been a pawn. She had been the napkin the players wrote their moves on. Mobile order for Chloe. The barista's voice broke her trance. She took the cup. It was hot. It was real. Her name correctly spelled on the side. Her coffee. She walked out into the bright, chilly Brooklyn afternoon. As she headed toward the subway, the sound of a jet engine screamed overhead. A silver shark lifting out of LaGuardia, ascending fast. A year ago, that sound would have brought pain. It was the sound of her failure, the sound of a world she had lost. She would have looked up with a desperate, pathetic longing, wondering if it was going to Paris, London, or St. Barth. Chloe stopped on the sidewalk. She looked up at the white scar in the blue sky. Then, she looked down. She looked at the steel and concrete hole in the ground, the stairs leading to the F train. The rumble of the approaching subway vibrated through the soles of her sensible, comfortable, $40 shoes. The jet was a fantasy. The subway was motion. One was a pressurized, air-conditioned lie. The other carried her home. Chloe adjusted her second-hand wool coat, settled the grip of her handbag, and took a sip of her latte. It was exactly the right temperature. She fixed her eyes on the subway entrance. She had a train to catch. She was grounded. And for the first time in her life, she was finally in control of the landing. The ending with the Spanish flavor. The true wealth. Chloe Sinclair learned the hardest way that a life built on someone else's money, someone else's plane, and someone else's husband is just a beautiful gilded cage. She was flying at 40,000 feet, but she had no control, and the landing was brutal. But from that rubble, she had to learn to walk for herself. Eleanor Croft, the true owner, didn't just get her jet back. She reclaimed her life, her company, and her power, proving that the best revenge is not just living well, but owning everything. Now Chloe, though far from the luxuries of Marbella Terraces or the palaces of Fifth Avenue, knew what true solidity meant. She knew that if she ever returned to New York, it would be by her own merit, to buy an apartment with a real mortgage in a stable neighborhood, not to pretend to be the owner of a jet. Her next flight would be in coach class, but her destination, her real destination, would be secured by her own two hands. And you? What do you think? Was Chloe a victim or a willing participant who naively traded luxury for her dignity? Do you think Eleanor's strategic revenge was justified? Or was it too cruel to leave her abandoned on the tarmac? What would you do in Eleanor's place? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If this story of betrayal, luxury, and an epic downfall hooked you, do me a huge favor. Hit like. Share it with someone who loves drama. And most importantly, click the subscribe button and turn on notifications. I have many more real stories like this to share with you.